the cognitive science behind why this works. It is 11 at night. A grade 11 student is sitting at the kitchen table with a chemistry textbook open in front of her. The final exam is in 9 hours. She has highlighted every line in 3 different colors. She has read the chapter on bonding 3 times. She has watched 2 videos on YouTube. She has made a poster of the periodic table and stuck it above her bed. As she closes the book and turns out the light, she feels something close to peace. She knows it. She is ready. The next morning, she walks into the exam hall. She opens the paper. The first question shows a molecule she has never seen before and asks her to predict whether it will be polar or non-polar. Her mind goes blank. She knows she has seen this. She remembers the chapter. She remembers the color. She used to highlight the definition, but she cannot produce the thinking the question wants. She stares at the page. She writes something. It is wrong. She did not fail because she was lazy. She failed because she studied the wrong way. The story of why she failed is the story of this chapter. It is the story of how the human brain actually learns. And it is the story of why concept-based inquiry works. Here is the thing. Most teaching methods evolved before we knew much about the brain. Concept-based inquiry evolved because of what we now know. The 7 phases you have walked through in this book are not a fashion or a curriculum trend. They are a method whose structure happens to match the way memory, attention, and transfer actually work in the human mind. We are going to walk through that science slowly. Each piece will name a cognitive principle. Each piece will then show the CBI move that uses it. By the end of this chapter, when somebody asks you why you teach this way, you will have 10 different answers. Each answer will be honest. Each answer will be useful. The generation effect. Let me start with the cognitive principle that I think changes the most teaching practice once a teacher really understands it. It is called the generation effect. The generation effect is the finding established in cognitive psychology over 50 years of careful experiments. That when a learner produces an answer themselves, they remember it vastly better than when they are told the answer. Not slightly better, vastly better. By some measures, 2 to 3 times more durable. The act of generation is itself the act of encoding. The brain that makes the meaning is the brain that keeps the meaning. Now think back to chapter 7 of this book, the chapter on concept attainment. The kindergarten teacher with the yes cards and the no cards. The cards are sorted on the floor. Tree, baby, puppy go on one side. Rock, cup, robot go on the other. The teacher refuses to name the concept. She waits. The 5-year-olds stare. Then one of them says, they all grow. Another says, they all eat. A third says, they're alive. What just happened cognitively is the generation effect in its purest form. The students did not hear the word living things. They generated it. The neural pathway that holds that concept was laid down by their own thinking, not by their hearing. That pathway will last for years. Compare this to the traditional classroom where the teacher writes living things on the board and reads the definition aloud. The students take notes. They underline the definition. They study it the night before the test. They forget it within a month. 2 classrooms, same concept, different cognitive operation, different result. The generation effect explains why so much of CBI feels uncomfortable to the new teacher. It feels uncomfortable because it requires you to withhold information that you, the expert, already have. The discomfort is the science doing its work. The silence after the sort, the wait after the question, the refusal to name the concept too soon. These are not pedagogical tricks. They are the conditions under which the generation effect operates. Take them away and you take away the durability of the learning. The testing effect. Now let me give you a second principle, almost as powerful. It is called the testing effect. The testing effect is the finding that retrieving information from memory strengthens that memory. Tests are not just assessments. Tests are learning events. Each time a student successfully pulls a piece of knowledge out of their own head, the path to that knowledge gets shorter, faster, more reliable. Here is what most teachers do not realize. The student in our opening story reread the chapter 3 times. Rereading does not produce retrieval. The student's brain was passively absorbing information. The brain that absorbs is not the brain that builds. If she had instead closed the book and tried to write the chapter from memory, then reopened the book and corrected what she missed, then closed it and written it again, she would have remembered 10 times more by morning. The work felt harder. The benefit was greater. There is a name for this in the literature: desirable difficulty. The testing effect explains phase 6 of the CBI cycle, the transfer task. Most teachers think of the transfer task as a check, a way to find out whether students have got it. The cognitive science tells us something more important. The transfer task is also a teaching event. The act of pulling the generalization out of memory and applying it to a new case is the act that strengthens the generalization. Students leave the transfer task knowing the idea better than they did when they started. The transfer task does not measure learning, it produces learning. This reframes assessment entirely. Every quiz, every exit ticket, every short retrieval prompt is also a tiny lesson. A class that does 5 short retrievals a week, each lasting 2 minutes, will remember more at the end of the term than a class that listens to 30 more minutes of lecture. The retrieval is the lesson. The lecture is the illusion of a lesson. Inductive learning. Let me give you a third idea. This one older but just as important. It comes from the work of Jerome Bruner in the 1960s and from the work of Hilda Thaba, who built it into a teachable method in the same decade. Inductive learning is the process by which the brain forms a general principle by encountering specific examples. We go from the particular to the general, from the puppy and the tree and the baby to the concept of life, from the French Revolution and the Arab Spring and the Civil Rights Movement to the concept of conflict driving change. The mind is, at its deepest level, a pattern detector. It cannot help noticing patterns. Show it 3 examples, and it will start to see what they share. Deductive learning runs in the other direction. You give the rule first, then you give examples, then you ask the student to apply the rule. This works for routine practice. It does not work for deep understanding. Deductive learning produces what some researchers call inert knowledge. The student can recite the rule. The student cannot recognize the rule in the wild. Ask them to apply it to a new case, and they will fail to even see that the rule is relevant. The 7 phases of CBI are an inductive architecture. Engage, focus, investigate, generalize, transfer, reflect. Each phase moves the learner from instance to pattern to principle to use. The brain is being asked to work in the direction it naturally wants to work. Now compare this to a traditional textbook chapter. The chapter opens with a definition of a key term. Then it offers 2 or 3 illustrative examples. Then it ends with exercises that apply the definition. The textbook is running the brain in reverse. It is deductive. It is the order in which an expert organizes their finished knowledge, not the order in which a novice builds new knowledge. The novice needs the examples first. The novice needs to do the inductive work. The textbook denies them that opportunity. This is why students who score well on definitions often perform poorly on transfer tasks. They were taught the rule, but they were never asked to discover it. Their knowledge has no roots. Their roots stay in the textbook. Schema theory. Now let me make the architecture even more visible. The 4th idea is called schema theory. A schema is a network of related concepts in long-term memory. Knowledge in the human brain is not stored as a list of facts. It is stored as a structure. Imagine a spider web. The nodes of the web are concepts. The strands of the web are relationships between concepts. When you learn something new, you do not file it into an empty drawer. You attach it to existing strands. If the new information cannot be attached to anything, it falls off the web and is lost. This explains a curious finding from memory research. The more you already know about a domain, the more easily you can remember new information in that domain. Experts have richer schemas. New information has more places to land. Novices have sparser schemas. New information has nowhere to land. The same hour of study produces wildly different gains depending on what is already in the network. What CBI does structurally is build the schema first. The concept is a node. The generalization is a strand between nodes. When students explore 3 case studies and arrive at the generalization, inequality in power and resources can lead to social and political change. They are not just learning a sentence, they are weaving a strand. Now, every new historical event they encounter for the rest of their lives has a strand to attach to. The Arab Spring slots into that strand. The protests in Chile slot into that strand. The students' own community, in a future decade, may slot into that strand. The information is portable because the architecture is portable. A traditional content-heavy classroom builds the opposite. It builds a long list of disconnected facts. Each fact is a free-floating node. The facts are forgotten within months because nothing holds them in place. CBI builds the web holds. Cognitive load theory. The fifth idea is one of the most practical. It comes from the work of John Sweller and his colleagues in Australia. Cognitive load theory begins with a simple observation about working memory. Working memory is the part of the mind that holds and manipulates information in the present moment. It is extremely limited. The classical estimate from George Miller in the 1950s was 7 plus or minus 2 chunks. More recent research has revised this downwards to about 4. 4. The brain you are teaching can only hold about 4 pieces of information in working memory at one time. Anything beyond 4 either falls out or blocks new information from coming in. This has serious teaching consequences. The teacher who explains for 15 minutes is loading working memory with 20 or 30 new chunks. By minute 3, the student's working memory is full. By minute 5, new information is displacing earlier information. By minute 15, almost nothing has been retained because there was no room to retain it. The student is, in effect, watching information enter and leave the same small room without any of it being stored. CBI builds external scaffolds for working memory. Concept walls externalize the network so that working memory does not have to hold it. Cross-comparison charts in phase 4 take 3 case studies and lay them side by side in columns so that the brain can compare them without trying to hold them all at once. Sentence stems offload the structure of the thought so that working memory can focus on the content. Even the simple act of writing on a sticky note removes a chunk from the head and puts it on the wall, freeing working memory to do new work. When you understand cognitive load, you stop apologizing for charts and walls and visible thinking routines. You start using them on purpose. The brain only has 4 chunks. Externalize everything else. The wall is the working memory of the class. The illusion of fluency. Now let me return to the student we met at the start of this chapter. Why did she fail despite hours of work? She fell into something psychologists call the illusion of fluency. The illusion of fluency is the dangerous feeling that you know something well because the information feels familiar. Rereading a passage creates this feeling. Highlighting creates this feeling. Watching a YouTube explanation creates this feeling. Each time the brain encounters the material, it feels easier to process. The student mistakes ease of recognition for depth of understanding. They feel ready. They are not ready. The cure for the illusion of fluency is to make recognition stop counting. You have to make the brain produce, not recognize, generate, not absorb, apply, not review. This is exactly what CBI's inductive moves force. The student cannot fake the sort. They either see the pattern or they do not. The student cannot fake the generalization. They either build a sentence that travels or they build one that breaks. The student cannot fake the transfer task. They either apply the idea to the new case or they reveal that they never had the idea in the first place. CBI is brutally honest about whether a student understands. That honesty is uncomfortable for both teacher and student. But the discomfort is the price of real learning. The student who feels uncertain in the middle of the sort is the student who is actually learning. The student who breezes through the highlights is the student who is heading for the failed exam. The spacing effect. The seventh principle is the spacing effect. The spacing effect is the finding that information learned across spaced encounters is retained vastly better than information crammed into a single session. 2 hours of study spread across 4 days outperforms 2 hours of study in one night. This has been known for over 100 years and reconfirmed in every decade since. It is one of the most robust findings in cognitive psychology, and it is one of the most ignored findings in traditional teaching. CBI naturally spaces the encounter with a concept. The concept is introduced through a provocation on Monday. It is sorted in concept attainment on Tuesday. It is investigated through case studies on Wednesday and Thursday. It is generalized on Friday. It is transferred to a new context the following week. It is reflected on at the end. Each encounter is at a different cognitive depth. Each encounter strengthens the memory. The same idea visited 6 times across 2 weeks is buried far deeper than the same idea hammered 6 times in one afternoon. When you teach in 7 phases, you are spacing without realizing it. The pedagogy hides a memory, science inside it. Far transfer. The 8th principle is the hardest in all of cognitive science. It is called far transfer. Far transfer is the capacity to apply a piece of learning to a context that looks very different from the context in which it was learned. A student who learns about ecosystems in year 5 and applies the same thinking to economic systems in year 11 has performed far transfer. Far transfer is the highest goal of education. It is also the rarest. The cognitive psychologist John Bransford and his colleagues have shown that far transfer is hard to produce reliably and almost impossible to produce without an articulated underlying structure. In other words, the student cannot transfer what they cannot say. This is exactly why generalizations matter. The generalization is the articulated underlying structure. It is what makes far transfer possible. The student who has built the sentence, systems break down when one part is disrupted, can apply that sentence to a coral reef, to a small business, to a friendship, to a global supply chain. The sentence is a bridge that carries the learning out of its origin context and into the world. Without that sentence, the learning stays glued to its origin. Ecosystems are remembered as ecosystems. They never become a way of seeing. When a teacher asks me what the single most important move in CBI is, I say it is the sentence. It is the generalization. Because the generalization is the only known cognitive instrument for far transfer. You can have inquiry without it. You cannot have transfer without it. Metacognition. The 9th principle is metacognition. The word comes from the developmental psychologist John Flavel. who used it in the 1970s to name the mind's capacity to think about its own thinking. Metacognition is what allows the learner to notice when they are confused, to adjust their strategy, to know what they know and do not know, and to evaluate their own work. In study after study, metacognition has been shown to be one of the strongest predictors of academic achievement and of learning outside school. Metacognition is the engine of self-directed learning. Phase 7 of CBI is the metacognition phase. Reflect. What did you understand? What did you change your mind about? What is still unclear? Where else might this idea live? These questions are not optional. They are the moment when the inquiry becomes durable. They are also the moment when the student begins to learn how to learn. Skip the reflection and you skip the metacognition. Skip the metacognition and you skip the most transferable skill in education. This is why we said in chapter 11 to protect the last 3 minutes of class ruthlessly. Those 3 minutes are the conversion phase. They are when the experience becomes a memory and the memory becomes a tool. The bell rings, the students leave, but the work of the lesson does not end when the bell rings. It ends when the reflection has been done. Dual coding. The 10th and final principle is called dual coding. It comes from the work of Alan Paivio in the 1970s. Dual coding is the finding that memory is dramatically stronger when verbal and visual information are linked. Words alone are weaker. Images alone are weaker. Words and images together are far stronger than the sum of either. This is why concept walls work. Words on sticky notes, plus images contributed by students, plus the spatial arrangement of the wall produces a multimodal memory trace. This is why graphic organizers work. The lines and boxes are not decoration. They are encoding. This is why anchor charts work. The chart is a visible structure that the mind attaches to. CBI is unusually visual for a high intellectual pedagogy. There is a reason. Visuals double the strength of memory. When you next set up a sort, do not just write the words. Use small cards. Use spatial arrangement. Use color for categories. Let students draw on the back of the cards. Let the wall fill up with images as well as words. None of this is decoration. All of it is dual coding. All of it is more memory, the claim. So here, in plain language, is the claim. Concept-based inquiry is not a fashion. It is not a brand. It is not somebody's preference. It is a method whose 7-phase structure happens to match what cognitive psychology has discovered about how the human brain actually learns. The generation effect, the testing effect, inductive learning, schema theory, cognitive load theory, the illusion of fluency, the spacing effect, far transfer, metacognition, dual coding. 10 different principles. CBI uses all 10. Traditional content-heavy teaching uses 1 or 2, usually the testing effect at the end through assessment, and even that one weekly. This is not a coincidence. The pioneers of concept-based curriculum and inquiry-based learning were not writing in isolation. They were drawing on the same psychological literature, the same classroom observations, the same patient research into what actually makes learning stick. The structure of the 7 phases was discovered the way most good things are discovered, not by inventing it from scratch, by noticing what worked and trying to understand why. Traditional teaching evolved before we knew most of this. CBI evolved because of what we now know. That is the difference. Both methods are sincere. Only one of them is built on the science. An action-oriented takeaway. I do not want to leave you with admiration. I want to leave you with a tool. Take the lesson you're planning for tomorrow. Lay it on the table in front of you. Ask the following question for each of the 10 principles. Does my lesson activate this principle? The generation effect. Are students generating an answer, or am I telling them? The testing effect. Are students retrieving from memory or only absorbing? Inductive learning. Am I moving from examples to pattern or from rule to application? Schema theory. Am I building a network or adding free-floating facts? Cognitive load. Am I externalizing onto walls and charts or loading working memory? The illusion of fluency. Am I forcing real production or letting recognition pass for understanding? The spacing effect. Will students meet this idea again across days or only today? Far transfer. Have I named a generalization the students could carry into a new context? Metacognition. Have I protected time for reflection at the end? Dual coding. Are my visuals doing memory work or just decoration? Most of us, when we honestly run this check, find that our lesson activates one or two principles. The testing effect at the very end. Maybe a bit of dual coding if we made a slide. We are leaving 8 out of 10 cognitive levers on the floor. Your job for the next lesson you teach is to activate at least 3. Pick 3. Redesign for them. Do not try to redesign for all 10 at once. That is a recipe for paralysis. Pick 3. Add a generation move. Add a retrieval moment. Add a reflection question at the end. Watch what happens. You will not need to be told that it worked. The room will tell you the recap and what comes next. Here is what we have said. The student who failed her chemistry test had studied for hours. She studied the wrong way because she did not know how memory works. The brain learns inductively, builds schemas, holds only 4 chunks at a time, fools itself with the illusion of fluency, and transfers only what has been articulated. Concept-based inquiry uses all 10 of these principles by design. Traditional teaching uses 1 or 2. That is why CBI works. Not because it is fashionable, because it is true to the brain. In the next chapter, we will talk honestly about what goes wrong when you try this. There are 8 common pitfalls. Every teacher who tries CBI hits at least 3 of them in their first year. We will name each one. We will name the recovery, and then we will give you the 5 most concrete moves you can make in your next class tomorrow without redesigning anything. The most action-oriented chapter of the book is the one that comes next. Take a breath. We are almost home.